My name is Manuel. I'm working in Erlang Solutions as tech lead in Sweden. So a long trip from there to here. But I'm here today to talk about PHP. That, well, it's very weird to talk about PHP in Erlang and Elixir conference. But well, I'm making usually that kind of weird experiments and weird projects. I did also the implementation of a MySQL server for Beam to ask to using SQL queries instead of HTTP REST APIs. I thought that well, maybe MySQL is more fitable to access to data than the HTTP JSON. But well, in this case, I was implementing PHP on top of Erlang because I thought that in the terms where we started to work, most of the people were using PHP, and I was considering that Beam has a lot of features that could be shared for PHP developers. So starting, this is going to be like a journey, and I'm going to try to explain what is actually PHP, because most of the people are hating it, and they are considering that it's only a language, and it's, well, most of the people consider that it's not a language itself, and more or less it's true from the beginning, but that was changing through the time. And I'm going to try to explain why I was trying to implement PHP on top of Beam, and finally explain how it's working the project I create, that is ephp. Well, I was not thinking about complicated names. It's plain simple, Erlang and PHP in the name. So starting, what is PHP? So PHP is a language with a accepted syntax. That is because it's following the C and Java syntax. So most of the people are comfortable using that kind of languages. It's easy to understand for most of the people that came from that specific world. And they use arrays for everything. There is not another type of data when we are out of the integers and strings. And it has a lot of examples these days. You can see the logos there. I'm pretty sure that you can only checking the logos. You have more or less the names of which projects are there. So, for example, WordPress, PrestaShop, Moodle. There is a lot. And if you check not the most famous language, which languages are running the servers in internet, you can see that these days, because I copied this from yesterday, is more than 75% of servers in internet running PHP at this moment. So PHP is very in use. So, well, when all the people start with the typical example of PHP, is saying, well, the hello world is something like a print hello world, and you are done. I was attending a conference from Rasmus Lerdorf, that was the creator of PHP, and he said, well, the first piece of code is not correct because PHP is a template language, it's a markup language. And even if you write the second part, only the text of hello world, you pass that to PHP and it's printing hello world. So it's correct to say that the second example is a valid PHP code and it's printing hello world. So I think from all the languages that you can find out there, this is the most simple language because it's detecting what is text and using it as is. And of course, as I said, PHP is a template language. So it's intended to be used to transform in text. Another example, a bit more complicated. If you see the right part, that is the structure and HTML page, you can see that is the HTML typical page that has, well, not a page, is extract for a table. But you can detect that is, well, the HTML and is injecting some specific code, like the for each, and some specific tags that is putting some specific data inside of the attributes and the content. In the left hand, there is an array that is specifying the information that is going to be used for each. This kind of program is usually what was developed from the very beginning. What was intended the way to work usually with PHP. So you can develop some specific pages. You have a set of pages in the server, and when the server is accessing to those pages, the information inside is translated only when you find a tag. That is because, for example, the left part is starting with the open a tag. If you are not opening the tag, that is considered like text and is not running anything. So the structure internally of a PHP system is the architecture that you can find when you are using PHP. It has when you are running a specific request in the server, you have specifically the part of in red. You can find the streams that are specific data that you can get from outside to get into your program. You have the output that is linked to the errors usually. And the configuration you can access to get general information that is configured for PHP. In the blue side, you have the specific part of the storage for the variables, the classes, objects, includes, functions, and constants. That is specifically the architecture that is configured when you are running PHP. So something that you can do with PHP, this is a real example I was using in the production. It's 20 lines and it's a gateway to translate something incoming like a request using JSON for a HTTP. It's creating a swap client to another server, completely different, putting the information that is received by JSON. And then there is returning something that is putting in result, and the result is putting in the output within code for who was calling. So this gateway is completely functional. It's to access to a server that was only talking in SOAP, and there is only 20 lines. So, well, and now Vim. Why PHP? In terms of why I was using PHP on top of Vim is because, well, I came from Spain, and all the countries are completely different using the languages and the technologies. And Spain and the telco companies are very weird, I have to say. And they are using all the time PHP and voice XML and the connections with asterisk, free switch. And they consider that using PHP to generate voice XML pages for the systems of telco was very easy, and they have a lot of people to hire because PHP is very famous, or there are a lot of people that prefer to learn how is working PHP in preference to other languages. So that is because even in telco companies they use PHP. But of course there's a lot of issues because the systems are not really, for example, PHP has not the possibility to run some specific process in background or do other things. that is very common also in other languages like Python or Ruby. When you are running some specific servers like web servers, usually that is triggering a request, is attending the request, and then die. And the problem with this is some of the application they were creating was related to queues of management of calls. So the keeping of the information and the retrieve that information to being used for the next call was very important. So as I say, the PHP technology is very limited. There is no concurrency control. There is single thread. There is no possibility to create another process. This is, of course, not real time. And even the PHP is time limited. If you are running for more than the limitation time that is configured, that is stopping. It's limited by the operating system. You can only run the number of processes that are configured or led by the operating system for that specific application. WebSocket, they say, well, what's that? It's not possible to use them with PHP. So, well, PHP has a great flexibility. As I said, it is possible to create great programs and flexible programs in only 20 lines. But with great flexibility comes great responsibility. I think PHP is the language that more vulnerabilities has these days also. It's not the most used, but also the most vulnerable. And the most difficult issue that is appearing these days is cross-site scripting, but also file uploading. Because as I said, when you put some PHP file in your server, that is running by your server. So if you are uploading a file and that is reachable by the web server, you are being able to run whatever that is uploading to the server. So that is because WordPress sometimes is so buggy. Well, the people can say, well, but even if you have to, if it's easy to learn, when we are talking about to use Erlang, for example, or Elixir instead of PHP, if we are going to jump into OTP, isn't easier like the proper language. And well, Elixir more or less is similar to Ruby, and that could be accepted. But Erlang is not, so it's weird. All the people that is starting to use Erlang says, well, that is so weird. And there are no working code. In Erlang, it's usual that you are searching for websites. You are only being able to find Sotonic. That is the only CMS that is already available these days. And it's not very common to see companies putting Sotonic as their CMS. It's more frequent that you see the people come to WordPress and put it fast, and that's all. And most of the companies think that, well, if we put some workaround like Redis, RabbitMQ, and everything like crons and a lot of stuff around PHP, it's not needed to change. So we can live with the workarounds. And other things, they need to be simpler, flexible, and have more examples. So that is because I was thinking about, well, if we brought PHP to Vim, so I was creating ePHP. In the architecture of PHP, every part that is related to those circles, I was creating one module that is inside of the ePHP, and well, this is built in Erlang. So that is because they are ePHP underscore and the name of the cycle. So you have a variable, the creation of different streams, for example, the handle of the output, the configuration, the handle of errors, the use of constants, the definition of functions, inclusions, objects, classes, and variables. Of course, most of the things that are in PHP, like objects, classes, and even the mutability, that is not being able in the Erlang, I had to interpret that behavior. So this is not compiling to Beam, that is interpreted. And the phase to make this action is we have the ephp parser. This is split in different files because I try to use leg and flex and vice. Well, the lexers that are available usually, but the PHP syntax is weird. So it's not being able to fit inside of that, and I had to write by myself the parsers in Erlang. So you can find the parsers under the ephp underscore parser underscore, and depends on what is parsing. That is the file that is in charge. So that generates the compiled tuples and records that is going to be in use for the interpreter. That is the PHP underscore interpret and ephp underscore context. So an example, in the left part you can see a PHP code, and the right hand is a parser code. That is when we apply the parsers, that is generating that specific representation that is going to be in use for the interpreter. A bit more nicer using the records, but wider because it's printing the name of the fields. Is like that. And well, I created this with the idea to be extensible. So if you create, you put ephp like a dependency in your project, and you create specific modules that has the behavior of PHP lib, implementing those functions, that is the definition of the what kind of information you are providing to ephp. You can define more functions inside of ephp, and configurations, constants, the handle of errors, and even classes inside of the system. So an example from the PHP lib that is in charge of the strings, you can see there, well, the first line, for example, is in array. That is a function available inside of PHP that is getting 2 arguments as minimum, 3 arguments as maximum. Is returning undefined if it happens some error, and is checking the input, like the first element should be a mixed. That is the way PHP is calling to whatever, or term of any in Erlang. The second should be an array, and the third is the optional value that is Boolean, but the default is false. So you can define all the specific functions you want to plug, and then define the specific function like this. That in this case is checking if that value is inside of the array. So it's only use a member in this case, and checking that that information is available or not. So it's only one line. And most of the functions, like the math functions and others, is very easy to implement. So as an example, in the project Bragful, that I call that for the whole project to don't be called the PHP, I use another name. I created 3 different repositories that are implementing JSON, MySQL, and XML. And in the left part, you can see the default libraries that are available inside of PHP by default. Because one of the things that PHP has that I think not most of the languages has, that is the huge number of functions that they have, is awesome. You can go to the document of PHP and find, well, I want to do something with the strings. You find generally, and I'm pretty sure that there are a function specifically to do that. So checking the, of course, I didn't implement 100% of all of them, but strings, for example, and file, I think, they have most of the implementation of the functions, and the others, well, are still pending. And as an example, I wrote a long time ago, this was in 2018, an example that I was working with the XMPP. The XMPP is a protocol that is using people like WhatsApp to communicate people at the beginning, but you can communicate also machines. So the idea was plug inside of the network of XMPP some component, and when you are connecting like a client, you ask something to that component, and that is behaving like a bot, responding something. The idea was create that component, putting ephp as the base of to create this specifically what I want to create regarding the bot, and create the specific functions to send and receive the messages from XMPP. The strat of the example, for example, this is what we are receiving using the standard request for PHP. We are receiving the whole specific XML, the stanza, something like that. And we are responding exactly the same. It's an echo bot. So you see the Snatch send binary and a Snatch message. That are the two functions that you can see here. They are created in Erlang, and they are published in the way of we can use them from PHP. So that are providing us a small set of functions that we can use, and the specific functions that we need for our goals. In this case, is getting the message, that is putting the request, performing some change that we can access to another system externally, and then provide an answer that is sending by the function Snatch send binary. And well, a Snatch message is a proper function to create the XML and not depend on something inside of PHP. So this is published in Medium. I think it's easier to find, but I can send you the URL if you want. This is in the Snatch XMPP. Snatch XMPP is a set of libraries in Erlang to connect using components for XMPP. I published there the Snatch PHP, that is the extension to put with Snatch and take advantage to use them together. So you can see there are only 3 files in the project, in the source code. The first one is the libraries that are in use inside of PHP, and the others are specifically the function that we need for the application. Another implementation was for Phoenix framework to prove that it's possible to use it also with Elixir, and is published in Hex. It's ePHP template. You can plug in your Phoenix application, and then they use templates that instead of .html .eex, you change that for PHP, and then you can use PHP instead of EEX. This is very useful if you want to provide some specific other different language to your designers. If you have different people in the company and the designers have no idea about EEX and they want to try what they are designing in the typical LAMP stacks that they have. I was implementing this because I was in that situation, and I was saying, well, better instead of explaining EEX to designers, I prefer to put PHP in my project. So as you can see, we can use even include ones, so the code can be split in different files. And well, the output is what is provided by the date, the function by PHP, and the bar dump of the server, request, get, and post. So you can see there, we have a perfect output of the full arrays that are usually set by PHP. So another implementation, I did this game, leprechaun.altenband.com, and I put another variation that is /bot. And instead of play, you have to develop a specific code in PHP to play. This is working in Elixir. This is the code is in GitHub if you want to check it. The base of how it's working is you have to go to the code tab and then write the specific code. There is a specific code that is working now to play the game, and then pressing run. That code is sent to the server, is compiled to be running, and then it's playing to the game. And you can see how it's playing the bot to the game. And well, the project is in Bragful PHP. We use Travis CI to check every commit that is done. The coverage of the code is 87%. It's low still, but it's not bad. It's published in Hex. The version now is 0.2.7. You can see there how it's working in Travis. It's published for most of the OTP versions. There are some of them that were a bit buggy, so I kept them out, like 20.3, because they have issues in the math library. And what is doing in Travis is the compilation, cross-reference, to be sure that there is no functions called that are not existing. Running the test. These days are 516 tests. The coverage is 87%, and dialyzer throw 0 warnings. So it's intended that the code is good enough. It's published in Hex, as you can see there. And well, if you want to help us to help you, if you want to use it, please use it. If you have one project or something like that, or one toy project, is okay. Report bugs in GitHub. We have the issues part reporting, and you can add more functions in the ephp lib modules or create your own extensions. You can join us in Jitter. That is the link in the GitHub. And give us a start in GitHub, of course. So, thank you. I have not the mic, but if you have any question, I can give you the mic. Any questions? No? That's all. Thank you.